Then a voice. Not the tower, someone else. Deep, calm, carrying the kind of authority that doesn't ask for permission. Elena, listen to me. My name is Dan. I'm a pilot. I can get you down safely, but you need to do exactly what I say. She doesn't question how he knows her name, doesn't ask where this voice came from. When you're falling from the sky, you grab whatever hand reaches out. I can't hold it, she gasps. The stick won't move. I'm going to die. Not today. 2 words, absolute conviction. Disengage your autopilot, right now. Her fingers find the switch. Click. Reduce collective to 60%. The helicopter drops faster. She screams. Trust me, the voice says. You're auto-rotating now. The rotors are windmilling. They're keeping you stable. Do you see the park, east side, soccer fields? Through tears and terror, she looks. Randall's Island, a rectangle of green in an ocean of concrete. I see it. That's your landing zone. 200 feet. Pull back on the cyclic. Nose up. 50 feet. Increase collective. The helicopter will cushion itself. She wants to ask how he knows. Wants to scream that she's never practiced auto-rotation in her life. Wants her father. Wants to wake up from this nightmare. Instead, she flies. 100 feet. 50. The voice guides her like a prayer. Her hands move on instinct, on trust, on the calm certainty in those words. The skids hit grass, hard. The helicopter bounces, tilts, settles, silence. Elena sits in the cockpit, engine still running, rotors still spinning, alive, breathing. Her whole body shakes. You did it, the voice says. One last time. Your father would be proud. Wait, she gasps into the radio. Who are you? How did you know my father? Only static answers. In the Apex Aviation Control Center, 20 employees erupt in applause. Relief floods the room like oxygen returning to drowning lungs. Coffee spills. Grown men cry. Someone live streams the whole thing, and within minutes the hashtag trends. Another miracle landing, another grateful CEO. But in the back of the room near the janitor's closet, a mop bucket sits abandoned. Water pools on polished marble. The cleaning cart stands empty. Dan Rivers is already gone. And Philip Morgan, 52 years old, chief financial officer, stands frozen by the window, watching emergency vehicles race toward the island. His face the color of old paper, his hands trembling so badly he has to grip the windowsill. He pulls out his phone, not his iPhone, the other one, the one nobody knows about. She survived, he whispers. The hydraulics failed exactly where you said, but she landed it. The voice on the other end doesn't sound pleased. Morgan closes his eyes. I understand. Yes, I'll make sure. 48 hours. He ends the call, looks at the celebration around him. Nobody's watching. They never watch the man in the expensive suit, the trusted CFO, the one who's been stealing them blind for 18 months. Nobody except the janitor who just disappeared. Text on screen 48 hours earlier. The letters dissolve. Time rewinds. We return to where stories always begin, in ordinary moments, before the world catches fire. Interior, Dan's apartment, South Bronx, early morning. 5:30 a.m. comes hard in the projects. The alarm clock sounds like a prison bell. Dan Rivers opens his eyes on a sofa that's seen better years. 3 cushions, 2 of them with duct tape holding the seams. But it's clean. Everything in this apartment is clean. On the coffee table, 2 orange prescription bottles catch the morning light filtering through thin curtains. Prazosin, for the nightmares that wake him screaming. Sertraline, for the depression that used to make getting out of bed feel like lifting concrete. He takes both pills dry, swallows, stands. The man who stands is 32 years old but carries decades in his shoulders. 6 feet tall, lean muscle earned through hard labor, not gym memberships. Dark skin marked with small scars. A longer one on his left forearm, another on his right shoulder. Stories written in tissue that never quite healed right. He wears boxer shorts and a faded Marines t-shirt. The eagle, globe, and anchor nearly worn invisible from washing. On his right bicep, a tattoo. Bold black letters surrounded by laurel wreaths, words that mean something, that cost something. Night stalkers don't quit. He runs his hand over it, remembers when the ink was fresh, when he believed those words would define his whole life. For Kandahar, before the mistake, before everything changed. The bedroom door stands slightly open. He pushes it wider, careful not to let hinges creak. Maya Rivers sleeps like children do when they still believe the world is mostly safe. 7 years old. Beautiful. Dark curls spread across a pillow decorated with princesses. One small hand clutches a stuffed elephant that's missing an ear. Her favorite. The one she's had since she was 2. On the nightstand, a framed photograph. 3 people in the picture. Dan, younger, smiling wider. A woman beside him. Sarah Rivers, dark eyes full of light, laughing at something. The baby in their arms is Maya, maybe 6 months old. Before the diagnosis, before the hospital, before Sarah told him with her last breaths to promise he'd keep flying. He hasn't kept that promise, but he's kept their daughter alive, kept her happy. That has to count for something. Morning, baby girl, he whispers. Maya doesn't wake. She never does this early. Good. Let her sleep. Let her have these last moments of peace before school, before homework, before a world that will judge her for everything she is and isn't. In the kitchen, Dan moves with practiced efficiency. Eggs scrambled with cheese. Toast from bread that was on sale. Orange juice diluted just slightly to make the carton last. He works in silence except for the sizzle of butter in a pan that's older than his daughter. The kitchen window looks out over Webster Avenue. From here, on the 6th floor, you can see Manhattan if you lean far enough. The glass towers catching dawn light. The city where billions of dollars change hands before most people finish breakfast. The city where his wife died in a hospital that charged them $6,000 per night. The city where he cleans toilets for $15 an hour. Daddy! Maya appears in the kitchen doorway, princess nightgown twisted sideways, hair a magnificent disaster. She's rubbing sleep from her eyes with small fists. Someone forgot to brush their hair, Dan says, fighting a smile. You forgot to wake me up for it. Come here then. This is their morning ritual. Has been since Sarah died, and Dan had to learn everything from YouTube videos and patient neighbors. Maya runs over, spins around, plants herself on the floor between his knees. He takes the brush from the counter, starts working through tangles with the gentleness of a man who understands that little girls remember how their fathers touch their hair. Ow! Daddy, you're pulling! Sorry, princess. Almost done. Why don't you work in an office like Jasmine's dad? He wears a tie. Dan pauses mid-brushstroke. This question comes up sometimes. Usually when Maya's been comparing lunch boxes or birthday parties or the size of Christmas presents. Because my job is honest work, he says carefully. I take care of buildings, make sure they're safe and clean. That matters. But don't you want to wear a tie? I wore a uniform once, Dan says. He separates her hair into sections, begins braiding. His fingers remember the motions. Left over center, right over center. In the military, that was a long time ago. Were you a soldier? Something like that. Did you fight bad guys? Dan's hands still, just for a second, long enough for the memory to surface. Sand in his mouth, smoke in his eyes. The family he almost killed because intelligence was wrong and he pulled the trigger anyway. Children's faces that visit him every night unless the pills keep them away. I tried to help people, he says finally, continues braiding. But sometimes helping is harder than fighting. Maya accepts this with the wisdom of 7-year-olds who haven't learned to question yet. Can I have the purple ribbons? Purple ribbons it is. He ties off both braids. Perfect. Sarah would be proud. The thought comes automatic. The grief that follows it less sharp than it used to be. 3 years softens the edges. Doesn't remove the wound. Just makes it something you can carry. They eat breakfast together at a small table that wobbles unless you put a folded napkin under one leg. Maya chatters about school, about her friend Destiny, about the substitute teacher who lets them have extra recess. Dan listens, asks questions, makes her feel like the most important person in the world. Because she is. Can we get McDonald's tonight? Maya asks through a mouthful of eggs. It's Tuesday. What do we do on Tuesdays? Cook at home. She sighs dramatically, but their nuggets are so good. My nuggets are better. Your nuggets are okay. Dan grabs a dishcloth, snaps it playfully in her direction. She shrieks, giggles, runs. For a moment, the apartment fills with laughter. The kind that pushes back shadows, the kind Sarah used to make. At 7:15, the neighbor arrives, Rosa Martinez, 63 years old, raised 5 kids of her own, now helps Dan with Maya in exchange for him fixing everything in her apartment that breaks, which is everything, often. Morning, mija, Rosa says, kissing Maya's forehead. Ready for school? Do I have to go? Education is the key that opens every door, Rosa says in Spanish, then English. Your papi knows. He's a smart man. Dan catches Rosa's eye. She knows. Not everything, but enough. Knows he had a life before this one. Knows the uniform in the back of his closet isn't just for show. Knows a man doesn't move the way Dan moves, doesn't watch people the way Dan watches, unless he's been trained to survive. I'll be back by 11:30, Dan tells her. Night shift, 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. Come home, sleep 4 hours, take Maya to school, sleep 2 more, pick her up, help with homework, make dinner, put her to bed, head back to Apex Aviation. Every day, for 3.5 years. You look tired, Rosa says quietly while Maya packs her backpack. I'm always tired. You need a better job, a life. I have a life, right there. He nods toward Maya. Rosa sighs. Doesn't argue. What's the point? Some men rebuild after tragedy. Others just survive it. Dan Rivers survives. At 8 p.m., Dan stands outside Apex Aviation headquarters. 40 stories of steel and glass stabbing into the Manhattan sky. The building cost $400 million to construct. The lobby floor is imported Italian marble. The elevator buttons are trimmed in actual gold. Dan enters through the service entrance in back, past the dumpsters, past the loading dock, past the sign that says, "Service personnel only." He clocks in on a machine older than most of the executives who work here. Grabs his cart from the supply closet, mop, bucket, cleaning solutions that burn his hands even through gloves. Trash bags, the tools of invisibility. Because that's what Dan Rivers is in this building, invisible. He starts on the 40th floor, always starts there. Executive offices, the corner office that belonged to Richard Sterling, founder, visionary, dead 9 months now in a plane crash that killed everyone on board. They said it was mechanical failure, weather, bad luck. Dan knows better. He cleans Richard's office last. The room hasn't changed, still full of photographs. Richard with presidents, with senators, with his daughter Elena at every age. Little girl on his shoulders, teenager at her high school graduation, young woman in a cap and gown from Princeton. The last photo shows them together in front of a helicopter. Both in flight suits, both grinning, father teaching daughter, passing down legacy. Dan stares at that photograph longer than he should. 3.5 years ago, a man came to the VA hospital where Dan was wasting away between therapy sessions and nightmares. Richard Sterling, billionaire. He sat down next to a broken pilot and made an offer. I need someone who sees things other people miss, Richard had said. Someone who understands danger. I'll pay you to clean my building, but what I really need is your eyes. My eyes for what? I think someone's trying to kill me, and when they do, they'll come for my daughter next. Dan had laughed, bitter. I'm a janitor with PTSD. Call the FBI. The FBI investigates after people die, Richard said. I want someone who prevents it, someone invisible, someone they'd never suspect. Why me? Richard had handed him a file. Dan's service record, the commendations, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the missions that were still classified, the mistake in Kandahar, all of it. Because you know what it's like to fail someone you were supposed to protect, Richard said, and you die before you let it happen again. He was right. Dan took the job. $15 an hour official, another $85,000 a year through an offshore account he didn't know Richard set up. The old man made sure Sarah's medical bills got paid, made sure Maya had what she needed, made sure Dan had a reason to stay alive. Then Richard's plane went down 6 months later. Dan has been watching ever since, waiting, knowing the threat is still here, closer than anyone suspects. The elevator dings. Dan turns. It's nearly 11 p.m. Nobody should be on this floor. Elena Sterling steps out, still in business attire. Blazer, skirt, heels that click against marble like gunshots. She's on her phone, doesn't look up. Why would she? Janitors are furniture. She walks past him toward her office. Her father's old office. The one she inherited along with everything else. $2 billion. 4,000 employees. Responsibility that's crushing her slowly. Dan can see it. The exhaustion in her posture. The tension in her shoulders. She's 35 but moves like someone twice that age. He goes back to mopping. Invisible. Excuse me. Dan looks up. Elena stands in her doorway, looking at him for maybe the first time ever. Yes, ma'am? How long have you worked here? 3.5 years. She studies him. Really studies him. Like she's trying to solve a puzzle. Did you know my father? The question catches him off guard. Careful. Don't reveal too much. I saw him around, Dan says. He seemed like a good man. He was. Her voice cracks slightly. She clears her throat. Professional mask sliding back into place. I need the office cleaned. There's a board meeting tomorrow morning. Yes, ma'am. She disappears inside. Dan pushes his cart forward, enters the office. She's at the desk reviewing documents. He starts with the trash cans, works methodically, stays quiet. Do you have children? Elena asks suddenly. Dan pauses. A daughter, 7 years old. What's her name? Maya. Pretty name. Elena doesn't look up from her papers. Your wife? Died 3 years ago, cancer. Now Elena looks up. Something shifts in her expression. Recognition of shared pain. I'm sorry, she says, and means it. That must be difficult, raising a child alone. We manage. Silence falls. Dan continues cleaning, wiping down surfaces, emptying waste baskets. Professional, efficient, invisible. Can I ask you something? Elena's voice is quieter now. Do you think my father's death was an accident? Dan's hands still. This is dangerous territory. I don't know, ma'am. But if you had to guess? He looks at her directly. Sees something in her eyes he recognizes. Suspicion. Fear. The sense that the world isn't as stable as everyone pretends. I think, Dan says carefully, that powerful men make powerful enemies. Elena holds his gaze. For a moment, something passes between them. Understanding, alliance. The recognition that they're both players in a game whose rules neither fully understands. Thank you for your honesty. Dan nods, goes back to work. But everything has changed. She asked the right question, which means she's starting to see, which means the people who killed her father will notice. He needs to move faster. At 2 a.m., Dan is alone on the 37th floor. Executive offices, mahogany desks, leather chairs, oil paintings worth more than he'll earn in a lifetime. He's not supposed to have access to Philip Morgan's office. The CFO keeps it locked. But Dan has keys. All the keys. Maintenance access. Another gift from Richard. Inside, he works quickly, checking trash, looking for anything unusual. Financial documents, phone records, anything. He finds it in the recycling bin. A bank statement, personal account. Philip Morgan owes $247,000 to someone called Venture Capital Associates, due immediately. Dan photographs it with his phone. Keeps searching. In the desk drawer underneath files, a burner phone. Cheap, prepaid, the kind people use when they don't want to be traced. Dan turns it on. No password, stupid or arrogant. Text messages, all from one number. No name. Unknown. Timeline confirmed. 48 hours. Morgan, what about my son? Unknown. Tommy stays safe if you complete the job. Fail and he dies screaming. Morgan, I understand. Unknown. Helicopter is fueled and ready. She flies Friday morning. Hydraulics will fail at altitude. Make it look natural. Dan reads it twice, 3 times. Photographing everything, Friday morning. 2 days from now. Elena's scheduled test flight before the North Star meeting. They're going to kill her the same way they killed Richard. He puts the phone back exactly as he found it. closes the drawer, leaves no trace of his presence. Out in the hallway, he pulls out his own phone, texts Becca Walsh, the HR director, the one person Richard told him to trust if things went wrong. Need to meet. Tomorrow. Urgent. Her response comes 30 seconds later. Diner on Webster, 2 p.m. Dan erases both messages, finishes his shift, clocks out at 4 a.m., rides the subway back to the Bronx as dawn breaks over the city. Rosa is asleep on his couch when he gets home. Maya is in bed, safe, dreaming. Dan stands in the doorway watching his daughter sleep. In 48 hours, someone will murder Elena Sterling. If he fails to stop it, Philip Morgan walks free. The conspiracy continues. More people die. But if he reveals himself, if he steps out of the shadows and exposes what he knows, everything changes. His job, his safety, Maya's safety. He made a promise to Richard. And before that, to Sarah. Keep flying, even when it's hard, even when it's terrifying. Dan looks at the photograph on Maya's nightstand, Sarah smiling, frozen in time. I'm going to break my promise, he whispers. I'm sorry, but some promises matter more. He's going to fly again, not in a helicopter, not literally, but he's going to step back into the light, back into danger, back into being the person he was before Kandahar broke him. Because Elena Sterling doesn't know it yet, but she's about to die. And the only person who can save her is a janitor she's never really looked at, a father who cleans toilets to feed his daughter, a pilot who hasn't touched a stick in 5 years, a warrior who thought his fighting days were over. Friday morning comes fast when you're trying to prevent a murder. The story is just beginning. The diner smells like coffee that's been burning since breakfast and grease that's been accumulating since the Reagan administration. Red vinyl booths patched with duct tape, linoleum floor cracked in patterns that resemble ancient riverbeds. The kind of place where a cup of coffee costs $2 and comes with judgment about how you take it. Becca Walsh sits in the back booth. She's wearing civilian clothes, jeans, a sweater, trying to blend in, but she carries herself like someone who spent 20 years in corporate America. Posture too straight, movements too controlled. Dan slides into the seat across from her. He's showered, changed, but the exhaustion clings to him like smoke. 4 hours of sleep in 3 days leaves marks that soap can't wash away. You look terrible, Becca says. I feel worse. Dan orders coffee from a waitress who doesn't pretend to care. We have a problem. Bigger than Philip Morgan, embezzling $4 million over 18 months? Dan blinks. You know about that? Richard knew. He'd been building a case. Becca slides a manila folder across the table. He left instructions. If anything happened to him, I was supposed to give this to someone he trusted. He wrote your name, Dan, yours, not the FBI, not the board, you. Dan opens the folder. The first page is a letter in Richard's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before his death. Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm paranoid. But 30 years building a company teaches you to recognize patterns. Someone close to me is planning something. The financials don't match. Philip is drowning in debt he can't explain. Board members are making decisions that benefit competitors. I hired you because you understand what I never could. How to see threats before they strike. How to protect people who don't know they need protection. My daughter is brilliant but naive. She believes in systems, in rules, in the inherent goodness of institutions. The world I've left her doesn't work that way. Protect her, not because I'm paying you, because she deserves to live. And Dan, when this is over, tell her who you really are. She needs to know that heroes don't always wear suits, Richard Sterling. Dan reads it twice. His hands are steady, but something in his chest feels like it's cracking. He knew, Dan says quietly. He knew they'd kill him. He suspected, couldn't prove it. Becca taps the folder, but he documented everything. Shell companies, offshore accounts, board members taking bribes. It's all here. And Philip? $250,000 in gambling debts. His son Tommy got into Cornell, needs $60,000 a year for tuition. Philip couldn't afford it on his salary, started borrowing from the wrong people. Dan closes the folder, thinks. They own him. Whoever wants Apex's technology, they bought Philip when he was desperate. Richard thought it was Vanguard Defense Consortium. They'd been trying to acquire Apex for years. He kept refusing. So they decided to take it the hard way. Kill Richard, destabilize the company. Elena can't handle the pressure. Stock price falls. Vanguard makes a hostile takeover offer. Except Elena's tougher than they expected, Becca says. She's actually stabilizing things. The North Star contract would give her legitimacy, cement her position. So they kill her too. Dan's voice is flat. Make it look like another accident. Company falls apart. Vanguard swoops in. Becca nods. What are you going to do? Stop them. How? You're a janitor. If you go to Elena with this, she'll think you're crazy. If you go to the police, Philip will disappear the evidence. If you do nothing, she dies Friday morning. Dan is quiet for a long moment. Outside the diner window, the Bronx moves past. Kids playing basketball in the street. Old men sitting on stoops. Life happening in the margins while billionaires play chess with human lives. I'm going to tell her the truth, Dan says. All of it. Who I am. What Richard hired me to do. What's going to happen if she gets in that helicopter. She won't believe you. Then I'll make her believe. Becca studies him, sees something in his face that makes her lean back slightly. You're going to expose yourself, risk everything, for someone who treats you like furniture. For someone Richard loved, Dan corrects, and because it's the right thing to do. You have a daughter to think about. I am thinking about her. What kind of man would I be if I let someone die because it was inconvenient to save them? Becca reaches across the table, squeezes his hand once. Brief, warm. Richard chose well, she says. That evening, Dan does something he hasn't done in 3.5 years. He calls in sick to work, tells his supervisor he has the flu, needs a few days off. The supervisor doesn't care. Janitors are interchangeable, invisible. One more reason nobody notices when they're watching. Instead of going to Apex, Dan stays home, helps Maya with homework, makes dinner, chicken nuggets, the homemade kind, better than McDonald's even if his daughter won't admit it. Daddy, why are you home? Maya asked through a mouthful of ketchup. Needed a break. Are you sick? Just tired, baby girl. Maya considers this. 7 years old, but reading people like someone 3 times her age. Children who lose mothers learn to watch their fathers carefully. Learn to spot the signs of falling apart. Are you sad about mommy? The question hits harder than expected. Dan sets down his fork, looks at his daughter, really looks. Sometimes, he says honestly, but I'm happy about you. Every single day. Would mommy be proud of us? Mommy is proud of us. Wherever she is, she's watching. And she sees how brave you are, how smart, how kind. Do you think she can see you too? I hope so. Then she knows you're the best daddy ever. Dan gets up, comes around the table, hugs his daughter so tight she squeaks. What was that for? Maya laughs. Just needed to remember why I do this. Later, after Maya is asleep, Dan sits at the kitchen table with Richard's folder spread in front of him. Documents, photographs, evidence of conspiracy, theft, murder. He creates copies, sends files to 3 separate email addresses. Becca, a lawyer Richard trusted, and his old commanding officer, Colonel Morrison, just in case. Then he writes a letter, on paper, old-fashioned, the way important things should be written. Elena, my name is Daniel Rivers. You know me as the janitor on the night shift. What you don't know is that your father hired me 3.5 years ago for a different purpose. I was a pilot, Chief Warrant Officer 3, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. I flew Black Hawks in combat zones, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. I was good at it until I made a mistake that almost killed innocent people. After that, I couldn't fly anymore. PTSD, medical discharge, lost everything. Your father found me at a VA hospital, offered me a bomb, not cleaning, watching. He suspected someone close to him was planning something. He needed eyes he could trust. He was right. I have evidence that Philip Morgan is being blackmailed to commit corporate espionage, that your father's death was not an accident, that you are the next target. Friday morning, you're scheduled for a test flight before the North Star meeting. Don't get in that helicopter. The hydraulic system has been sabotaged. It will fail at altitude. You will die unless you trust me. I know how this sounds. A janitor claiming to be a decorated pilot. A conspiracy theory from someone you've never noticed. But your father trusted me, and I'm asking you to do the same. If you want proof, meet me tomorrow. 6 p.m. The roof access where the helicopter is stored. Come alone. Daniel Rivers. He seals the letter, addresses it, will deliver it personally tomorrow to her office. Then he does the hardest thing. He writes a second letter, this one to Maya, in case everything goes wrong, in case Philip's people decide the janitor knows too much. My beautiful Maya, if you're reading this, it means Daddy had to do something brave and it didn't work out the way I planned. I'm so sorry, baby girl. I need you to know that everything I did because it was right. Because a good man protects people even when it's dangerous, even when it costs everything. Your mother taught me that. Before she died, she made me promise to keep flying. Not helicopters, but in life. To not let fear make me small. I broke that promise for a while. Hid. Played it safe. But then I remembered something. You're watching me. Learning how to be in this world by watching what I do. And I want you to learn that courage matters more than comfort. Mrs. Martinez will take care of you. There's money set aside. College fund. Everything you need. Becca Walsh knows where it all is. Be brave, Maya. Be kind. Be the light your mother was. I love you more than all the stars and all the skies. Daddy, he folds it, puts it in an envelope, hides it in his sock drawer under the uniform he hasn't worn in 5 years. Sits on the couch in the dark, praying he never has to let her read it. Interior, Apex Aviation, executive floor. Next day, Elena arrives at 8 a.m. like always. The building is already buzzing. Assistants running, phones ringing. The machinery of capitalism grinding forward. Her assistant hands her coffee. Black, no sugar. The way she takes everything. Bitter and efficient. You have the board meeting at 9, conference call with North Star at 11, helicopter pre-flight check at 3, interview with Forbes at 5. Cancel the Forbes interview. Ma'am, they've been requesting for months. I said cancel it. Elena's voice has an edge. She hasn't slept well. Dreams of her father falling from the sky. Dreams of being next. She enters her office, closes the door, leans against it. On her desk, an envelope. Her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Elena opens it, reads again, sits down hard in her chair. A janitor, claiming to be special forces, claiming her father hired him as protection, claiming Philip is a traitor, claiming the helicopter is sabotaged. It's insane. Except her father did act strange those last few months. Secretive. Worried. She'd assumed it was stress. The weight of running a company. But what if it was more? And Philip has been nervous lately, sweating through meetings, hands shaking. She'd assumed pressure. But what if it was guilt? And the helicopter? She's been flying since she was 16, never had a mechanical issue. But what if Friday is the first time? Elena picks up her phone, dials security. This is Elena Sterling. I need background information on one of our maintenance staff. Daniel Rivers, night shift janitor. Everything you have. She hangs up, stares at the letter. 6 p.m., roof access, come alone. Every rational bone in her body says, don't go. It's a trap, a scam, a disturbed employee with delusions. But there's another voice, quieter, the one that sounds like her father. Trust your instincts, Elena. They're usually right. At 6 p.m., Elena stands in front of the roof access door. She's changed out of her suit, jeans, a sweater, trying to look less like a CEO, more like someone who might believe a janitor's story. She pushes through the door. The roof is empty except for the helicopter, and a man standing beside it. Dan Rivers looks different out of his uniform, jeans, black jacket. But it's the way he carries himself that strikes her. Military posture, alert eyes. This is not a man who cleans toilets because he can't do anything else. This is a man who chose invisibility. You came, Dan says. I'm here. Doesn't mean I believe you. Fair enough. Dan walks to the helicopter. Come look at this. Elena approaches, cautious, ready to run if this goes wrong. Dan opens the maintenance panel, points to the hydraulic lines. See this coupling? It's been loosened, not enough to fail on the ground, but at altitude under pressure, it'll separate. You'll lose hydraulic fluid, controls will freeze, you'll have maybe 3 minutes before you're in free fall. Elena looks. She knows helicopters. Her father taught her. The coupling does look wrong, too loose, but it could be normal wear, or it could be sabotage. This proves nothing, she says. I have more. Dan pulls out his phone, shows her photographs, bank statements, text messages. Philip owes $250,000. His son needs tuition. Someone offered him a way out. Sabotage your helicopter. Let you die. Vanguard takes over Apex. Elena scrolls through the images. Her face goes pale. Where did you get these? Your father taught me how to look in places people think are hidden. This is corporate espionage, industrial theft. You could go to prison. I could, but I won't, because you need this information to stay alive. Elena hands back the phone, steps away, processing. Why should I trust you? I don't know you. For all I know, you planted this evidence. Maybe you're working for Vanguard. If I was, you'd already be dead. I've had 3.5 years of access to this building. To you. I've been in your office alone at night dozens of times. If I wanted to hurt you, I've had every opportunity. Elena knows he's right, hates that he's right. So what are you, really? Dan reaches into his jacket, pulls out a small leather case, opens it, inside military identification. Photos of him in uniform, medals, commendations. Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Rivers, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, 1,400 combat flight hours, Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal with Valor Device. His voice is quiet, factual. I was one of the best pilots in the military. Then I made a mistake, fired on what I thought was an enemy vehicle. Turned out to be a family. 2 parents, 4 kids. They survived, but I didn't. Didn't survive? Not inside. Dan closes the case. I got discharged, lost my certifications, couldn't fly anymore. Every time I heard rotors, I was back there, seeing those children. Your father found me when I was deciding whether living was worth the effort. Elena sees it now, the pain behind his eyes, the weight he carries. This isn't a scam. This is a man telling the truth in the only way he knows how. My father gave you a purpose. He gave me a reason to get up in the morning. Made sure my wife's medical bills got paid. Made sure my daughter had what she needed, and he asked one thing in return. Watch over you. You have a daughter. Maya, 7 years old. She's the reason I'm still here. Elena looks at the helicopter, at the loosened coupling, at the man who's been invisible for 3.5 years. If I don't fly Friday, the board will see it as weakness. They'll force me out. Everything my father built falls to Vanguard anyway. Not if we expose Philip first. Get evidence to the FBI. Protect his son so he'll testify. Break the conspiracy before they break you. We? Elena meets his eyes. Why would you keep helping? You could disappear. Take your daughter somewhere safe. Because your father trusted me. And because walking away while someone dies isn't something I can do anymore. The roof access door bangs open. Both of them turn. A little girl runs out, 7 years old, braided hair with purple ribbons. She stops when she sees Elena. Daddy, Mrs. Martinez said you were here and you weren't supposed to be here, and I got worried, and I told her I needed to see you right now, so she brought me. And who's that pretty lady? Maya says all this in approximately one breath. Dan's face shifts through several emotions. Surprise, concern, love. He kneels down. Maya, what did we talk about? About coming to Daddy's work? That I shouldn't unless emergency. Maya looks at Elena, curious, unafraid. Are you Daddy's boss? Elena blinks, looks at Dan. He shrugs helplessly. I'm Elena, she says, kneeling to Maya's level. And yes, sort of. Your daddy works very hard. He's the best daddy ever. He makes nuggets and does my hair and reads me stories even when he's tired. Something in Elena's chest cracks open. This child, This beautiful, innocent child, talking about her father with such absolute faith, the way Elena used to talk about Richard before the world got complicated. I bet he is, Elena says softly. Are you nice to my daddy? Some people aren't nice to him because he cleans, but cleaning is important work. It keeps people safe. You're right, it is important. Maya studies Elena with the intense scrutiny only children can manage. Then she nods, satisfied. Okay, I like you. You can be daddy's friend. Rosa Martinez appears in the doorway, out of breath, apologetic. I'm so sorry, Mr. Rivers. She insisted. I couldn't stop her. It's okay, Rosa. Dan picks up Maya. We were just finishing. But Elena stands, looks at this man, this janitor, this warrior, this father, sees him clearly for the first time. Tomorrow, Elena says, my office, 8 a.m. Bring everything you have. We're going to the FBI together. Dan's eyebrows rise. You believe me? My father trusted you. That's enough. She looks at Maya. And anyone who raises a daughter this brave can't be all bad. Maya beams. See, Daddy? I told you people would like you if they really saw you. Out of the mouths of children. Truth that adults spend lifetimes avoiding. The next morning, Elena cancels every meeting, tells her assistant she's unavailable, locks her office door. Dan arrives at 8 precisely. He's brought copies of everything, financial records, text messages, photographs, Richard's letter, 3.5 years of careful documentation. They spread it across her conference table. Start building a timeline. Philip started borrowing 18 months ago, Dan explains. Small amounts at first, then larger. By the time he realized the interest rates were criminal, he was in too deep. And Vanguard? They bought his debt, offered to forgive it if he helped them. First it was just information, company secrets, board meeting notes. Then they wanted more. Elena finds a photograph. Philip meeting with a man she doesn't recognize. Outside a restaurant. Envelope changing hands. Who is this? Viktor Sokolov, Vice President of Vanguard Defense. He's the handler. Can we prove that? Not in court, not yet. But if Philip testifies, if his son is protected, he might cooperate. Elena sits back, thinks like a CEO. We need leverage, something bigger than the FBI, something public. What are you thinking? The North Star meeting, it's not just executives, it's press, investors, politicians. If we expose Philip there, in front of everyone, Vanguard can't cover it up. That's risky. Philip might panic, run, or worse. Then we make sure he can't run. Elena picks up her phone, dials. Becca, I need security footage. Every entrance and exit. Philip Morgan's movements for the last 6 months. Yes, now, I'll explain later. She hangs up, looks at Dan. You're not just a pilot, are you? You're used to planning operations. Missions. We called them missions. And yes, this is just another mission, except the stakes are higher. Because if we fail, I die. Because if we fail, everything your father built dies. And Philip's son probably dies. And Vanguard wins. Elena nods slowly. Then we don't fail. They work through the day, building a case, plotting strategy. By evening, they have a plan, dangerous, complicated, requiring perfect timing, but possible. One problem, Dan says. We're assuming Philip won't try to kill you before Friday. What if he moves up the timeline? Then you'll be there to stop him. I can't be with you every second. So teach me. You're a soldier. Teach me how to stay alive. Dan considers this, then nods. Basic threat awareness, starting now. When you walk into a room, where do you look first? The people? Wrong, exits. Always know where the exits are, where cover is, who's between you and safety. For the next hour, Dan teaches Elena how to think like someone being hunted, how to vary routes, check cars for tampering, notice when someone's following. All the survival skills he learned in training and refined in combat. Lena absorbs it like she absorbs everything, quickly, efficiently, filing information away for when she needs it. You're a good student, Dan says. I have a good teacher. There's a moment, brief, where their eyes hold, where something unspoken passes between them. recognition, attraction, the beginning of trust that could become more. Elena looks away first, professional boundaries reasserting themselves. I should go home. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. Elena, Dan's voice stops her at the door. Thank you for believing me. I know it wasn't easy. My father taught me to judge people by their character, not their credentials. I forgot that lesson. You reminded me. She leaves. Dan sits alone in the office, looks at Richard's photograph. I'm trying, sir, he says to the empty room. I hope I'm doing this right. Thursday passes in tense preparation. Elena and Dan communicate through encrypted messages. Becca provides security footage showing Philip entering the helicopter hangar multiple times. Alone. Late at night. Each visit lasting 15 to 20 minutes. Evidence building. Case strengthening. But Philip knows something is wrong. He can feel it. The way animals sense earthquakes before they hit. That evening, Philip sits in his car outside Tommy's school, watching his son at baseball practice. 17 years old, strong, healthy, everything Philip isn't. The burner phone rings. You're getting sloppy, the voice says. No greeting, no warmth. The janitor's been asking questions. The HR woman is accessing files. Elena canceled the Forbes interview. They're on to you. I can fix this. No, you can't. Which is why we're moving to contingency. What does that mean? It means tomorrow morning, very early, you're going to the office. You're planning to complete the sabotage, and you're going to make sure Elena gets in that helicopter no matter what. And if she refuses to fly, then you make her. Gun to her head, if necessary. We're done being subtle. Philip closes his eyes. My son. We'll live if you succeed. We'll die screaming if you don't. Your choice, Bob. The line goes dead. Philip sits in his car, watching Tommy, knowing that in 12 hours he's going to try to murder someone, or die trying, or watch his son die if he doesn't. There are no good options left, only choices between horrors. Inside the school, Tommy hits a line drive to center field. His father watches, memorizing, in case it's the last time. Friday morning comes cold and clear. Perfect weather for flying, perfect weather for dying. Elena wakes at 5 a.m., can't sleep anyway. She showers, dresses in her flight suit, looks at herself in the mirror. Today she either exposes a conspiracy or becomes another Sterling killed in an aviation accident. Her phone buzzes, text from Dan, FBI agent standing by, security alerted, helicopter grounded until we give signal. You're safe, she texts back, thank you. For everything, just doing my job, ma'am. Elena smiles at that. 3 days ago, she didn't know his name. Now he's the person she trusts most in the world. She arrives at Apex at 6:30, building mostly empty. Security waves her through. The elevator rises. 40 floors, each one bringing her closer to confrontation. The doors open. Philip Morgan stands in her office, holding a gun. I'm sorry, Elena, he says. His hand is shaking so badly he can barely keep the weapon level. I'm so sorry, but you're getting in that helicopter. And you're going to fly. And you're going to die, because if you don't, my son will. Elena's training kicks in, Dan's voice in her head. Exits, cover, distance. She steps back toward the elevator. Philip moves forward. Please don't make this harder. Philip, we can protect Tommy. FBI witness protection. You testify against Vanguard. Everyone wins. They'll kill him anyway. They have people everywhere. FBI, police, government. There's nowhere safe. So you kill me instead? That's your solution? It's the only solution I have left. Elena hears something. Behind Philip. Quiet footsteps. Dan appears in the doorway. Silent. He's holding something. A mop handle. Ridiculous. But his stance isn't. Military. Predatory. Elena keeps her eyes on Philip. Doesn't give away Dan's presence. Your son wouldn't want this, Elena says. Tommy's a good kid. You think he could live knowing his father committed murder? He'll live. That's all that matters. Dan moves, fast. Trained. The mop handle comes down on Philip's wrist. The gun clatters to the floor. Philip cries out. Dan has him in a control hold before he can react. Professional. Efficient. This is what 1,400 combat hours looks like in civilian clothes. It's over, Philip, Dan says quietly. FBI's downstairs. Your son is already in protective custody. You don't have to do this. Philip collapses, not fighting, just breaking. They'll kill him. They'll find a way. Not if you help us stop them. Elena picks up the gun, checks the safety, holds it like someone who knows weapons. Her father taught her that too. Who's running this, Philip? Who's really in charge? Philip looks up, tears streaming. You want the truth? It's not Vanguard. They're just middlemen. Then who? Your board. 3 of them. Beck, Morrison, Chen. They've been planning this for years. Saw your father as an obstacle. When he wouldn't sell, they decided to take it by force. Elena's world tilts. Harrison Beck, the chairman, the man who's been pushing her, testing her, undermining her since Richard died. They killed my father. I helped them. I'm so sorry. They had Tommy's school schedule, photos of him in class. I had no choice. There's always a choice, Dan says. But his voice isn't hard. He understands. Fathers protecting children. It's the one thing he'd probably kill for, too. The elevator dings. FBI agents pour out, led by Becca and a woman Elena doesn't know. Agent Sarah Mendez, the woman says, showing credentials. We've been investigating Vanguard for 8 months. Mr. Rivers provided the evidence we needed to move forward. Dan releases Philip. Agents take over. Read him his rights. Cuff him gently. My son, Philip says. Please, tell me he's safe. 2 agents with him now, Mendez confirms. New identity, full protection. He's safe, Mr. Morgan. You did the right thing in the end. They take him away. Elena stands in her office, trying to process. 3 board members, conspiracy, murder, all for money and control. Dan approaches carefully. You okay? My father knew. That's why he was paranoid. Why he hired you. He knew someone on the board wanted him dead. He knew. Couldn't prove it, but he made sure you'd have protection when they came for you. Elena looks at Dan, really looks. This man who's been invisible for 3.5 years, who saved her life multiple times, who asked for nothing in return. I owe you everything. You don't owe me anything. This is what your father paid me to do. No, he paid you to watch. You chose to act. There's a difference. The moment stretches. Outside, dawn breaks over Manhattan. A new day, a second chance. What happens now? Elena asks. Now you run your company, Dan says. Board gets cleaned out. Philip testifies. Vanguard executives get arrested. You survive. And you? Go back to being a janitor, I guess. It's what I know. Elena shakes her head. No, that's not what happens. What happens is you take a position in this company that matches your skills. Head of security, chief operations officer, something real. I have a 7th grade education and a dishonorable discharge. I'm not qualified. You have 1,400 combat hours and saved my life 3 times this week. You're overqualified. Elena extends her hand. What do you say, Daniel Rivers? Ready to stop hiding. Dan looks at her hand, thinks about Maya, about Sarah, about the promise to keep flying. He shakes. Let's see if I remember how to be visible. The story is far from over. The helicopter still sits on the roof. The conspiracy still needs exposing. The board meeting is in 3 hours. But for the first time in 3.5 years, Dan Rivers is standing in the light, and Elena Sterling is seeing clearly. Together, they're going to finish what Richard started. The hardest part is just beginning. Interior, Apex Aviation Headquarters, main atrium. Morning, the atrium of Apex Aviation was designed to intimidate. 40-foot ceilings, Italian marble floors that cost more per square foot than most people's homes. A chandelier commissioned from a Danish artist who only worked with ethically sourced crystals. Everything about the space screamed power, wealth, permanence. 200 people filled the space now. Board members in $1,000 suits. Investors with portfolios worth millions. Press with cameras ready to capture whatever came next. The annual shareholder meeting. The one where Elena Sterling would either cement her position as CEO or be voted out by the very people who conspired to murder her father. Harrison Beck stood at the podium. 70 years old, silver hair perfectly styled, tan that came from weekends in the Hamptons, not from working outdoors. He'd been on Apex's board for 32 years, watched Richard build an empire from nothing, and decided somewhere along the way that he deserved a piece of it. Ladies and gentlemen, Beck's voice carried the authority of decades in boardrooms. We gather today at a critical juncture for Apex Aviation. 9 months ago, we lost our founder, Richard Sterling, a tragedy that shook us all. Murmurs of agreement, respectful nods. Nobody mentions that 3 people in this room helped orchestrate that tragedy. His daughter Elena has worked tirelessly to maintain stability, but the numbers don't lie. Revenue down 12%, stock price volatile, key contracts in jeopardy. Beck paused for effect. The board has a duty to shareholders, to employees, to ask difficult questions about leadership. Elena sat in the front row, flight suit replaced by a Navy power suit, hair pulled back, every inch the CEO her father raised her to be. But her hands gripped the armrest tight enough to leave marks. Beside her sat Becca Walsh, and beside Becca, in a suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders, sat Dan Rivers. He'd borrowed it from a neighbor. The pants were an inch too short, the jacket pulled slightly across his back, but he wore it like armor, like he'd worn his uniform once. Maya sat on Dan's other side. She'd insisted on coming. Rosa had dressed her in her church clothes, a purple dress with white shoes, her hair in perfect braids. She swung her legs, not quite reaching the floor, fascinated by the chandelier. "Daddy, why is that mean man talking about Miss Elena like that?" Maya whispered. "Because some people think they can control others with words," Dan whispered back. "Watch what happens when they can't." Beck continued. "Therefore, the board recommends a vote of no confidence in Elena Sterling's leadership. We propose installing interim management while we search for a permanent CEO with the experience necessary to guide Apex into the future." The room erupted. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, investors looked concerned. Elena stood. Every eye turned to her. "Thank you, Harrison, for that introduction." Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Before we vote, I'd like to share some information the board might find relevant." Beck's smile tightened. "Elena, this isn't the time for emotional appeals. The numbers speak for themselves." "I agree. Numbers do speak." Elena nodded to the tech team. A screen descended behind the podium. "Let's look at some numbers together." The first slide appeared. Bank statements, offshore accounts, money trails highlighted in red. Over the past 2 years, $4 million has been systematically stolen from Apex, funneled through shell companies, distributed to various parties. Elena's voice remained steady, professional. "The CFO, Philip Morgan, has been arrested by the FBI this morning in connection with this theft." Gasps, shock. Beck's face went pale. But Philip didn't act alone. Another slide. Photographs. Beck meeting with Viktor Sokolov outside a restaurant. Envelope changing hands. 3 board members conspired with Vanguard Defense Consortium to destabilize this company, to drive down stock prices, to force a hostile takeover. Now the room exploded, shouting, denials, cameras everywhere. "This is absurd," Beck stammered. "Doctored evidence, a desperate attempt to deflect from your failures." "Then explain these." Another slide. Emails, texts, communications between Beck, board members Morrison and Chen, and Vanguard executives. "The FBI has verified all of this. Warrants have been issued." As if on cue, federal agents entered from the side doors. Agent Mendez led them. Professional, efficient. They moved toward Beck. "Harrison Beck, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and murder." Mendez's voice carried across the now silent atrium. "You have the right to remain silent." Beck tried to run, ridiculous at 70. An agent caught him before he made it 3 steps. Cuffed him, read him his rights, while cameras captured every humiliating second. Morrison and Chen didn't even try. They sat frozen, watching their carefully constructed conspiracy collapse in real time. More agents, more arrests. The board members led away in handcuffs, the press going absolutely wild. The story of the decade happening live. Elena stood at the podium, watching. This should feel like victory, but mostly it just felt exhausting. When the chaos died down slightly, she spoke again. My father built this company on principles, integrity, innovation, the belief that we serve something larger than profit. Her voice cracked slightly, first sign of emotion. He was murdered because he wouldn't compromise those principles, because he refused to let Apex become a tool for people who valued money over human life. The room had gone quiet, 200 people listening to a woman eulogize her father while standing in his company. I'm not asking you to keep me as CEO because of sympathy or legacy. I'm asking because I will die before I let this company become what they wanted it to be. Elena looked directly at the remaining board members, the ones who weren't conspirators. Vote however your conscience dictates, but know that if I stay, things change. No more board members who see employees as expendable. No more contracts that compromise our ethics. No more business as usual. She stepped down from the podium, returned to her seat. The vote happened quickly after that. Remaining board members, shareholders, a show of hands that was really a referendum on what kind of company Apex would be. When the count finished, Elena had won. Not unanimously, but decisively. She was still CEO. Apex was still hers, but the cost. The cost was written on her father's grave. After the meeting, after the press dispersed, and the investors left, and the FBI finished their preliminary work, Elena found herself alone in her office, 40 floors up, looking out over Manhattan, the city her father loved, the city that killed him. A knock at the door. Come in. Dan entered, still in the borrowed suit, Maya holding his hand. We should go, Dan said. Let you process. Stay, please. Elena turned from the window, looked at them, father and daughter, the family that had nothing to do with corporate warfare but got dragged in anyway. I owe you both an explanation. You don't owe us anything, Dan said. Yes, I do. Elena knelt down to Maya's level. Maya, do you know what your daddy did this week? Maya nodded seriously. He saved you, like a superhero. Exactly like a superhero. He was so brave, and I wasn't very nice to him before I knew how brave he was. That's okay, Maya said with the wisdom of 7-year-olds. Sometimes people are mean when they're sad. Were you sad about your daddy? Elena's eyes filled with tears. She'd held it together through arrests, through votes, through press conferences. But this child's simple understanding broke her. Yes, I was very sad about my daddy. Me too about my mommy. Maya stepped forward, hugged Elena, small arms around her neck. But it gets better. Daddy says mommy's watching from heaven, and she's proud of me. Your daddy is probably proud of you too. Elena held this child and cried, really cried, for the first time since Richard's funeral. All the grief and rage and loneliness pouring out while a 7-year-old patted her back and said, It's okay, it's okay. Dan watched, his own eyes wet, this moment between his daughter and the woman he had been hired to protect. Something shifting, something new beginning. When Elena finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes, smiled at Maya. Thank you, I needed that. You're welcome. Can I draw on your fancy paper? Elena laughed, actually laughed. You can draw on whatever you want. While Maya settled at the conference table with expensive Apex letterhead and a handful of pens, Dan and Elena stood by the window. Your daughter is remarkable, Elena said. She's the only good thing I've ever done. I doubt that's true. Elena looked at him, this man who'd been invisible for so long. What happens now, for you? I don't know. Keep cleaning, I guess, until you find a real head of security. I was serious about that offer. You're qualified, more than qualified. I'm a high school dropout with PTSD who hasn't held a professional position in 5 years. You're a decorated combat veteran who just prevented a hostile takeover and saved my life multiple times. I'll take that over an MBA any day. Dan was quiet, thinking. It's not just about me, it's Maya. What kind of life is this for her? Her father working security at a company where people tried to commit murder last week? What kind of life is it for her watching her father hide who he really is? The question hung between them. She asked me last week why I don't wear a tie to work, Dan said quietly. Why her friends' dads have offices and I have a mop closet. I told her honest work has dignity. But that's a lie, isn't it? I'm not cleaning toilets because it's dignified. I'm doing it because I'm hiding. From what? From failing again, from trusting myself, from believing I deserve better. Elena reached out, took his hand. The gesture surprised them both. My father saw something in you, not just your skills, your character. He trusted you with the thing he loved most in this world, me. She squeezed his hand. Maybe it's time you trusted yourself. Before Dan could respond, Maya called out, Miss Elena, I drew you a picture. They went to the table. Maya had created a masterpiece in crayon. 3 figures, a tall man, a woman in a dress, a small girl between them holding both their hands. Above them, 2 figures in clouds, a man and a woman, watching. That's you and Daddy and me, Maya explained. And that's your daddy and my mommy in heaven. They're friends now. They want us to be happy. Elena stared at the drawing, at this child's vision of family, of connection, of moving forward while honoring the past. Can I keep this? Elena asked. It's for you, so you remember you are not alone. Elena framed that drawing, hung it in her office where her father's photograph used to be, a reminder that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most. The following weeks moved fast. Philip Morgan testified before a grand jury, gave names, dates, details. The conspiracy went deeper than anyone expected. Not just Vanguard, defense contractors, government officials. A web of corruption using Apex technology to funnel weapons to unauthorized buyers. The FBI arrested 17 people, seized millions in assets. The scandal made national news. The Apex conspiracy became shorthand for corporate crime. Through it all, Elena led. She restructured the board, brought in people Richard had trusted, implemented ethics protocols, opened investigations into every contract signed in the past 2 years. And she offered Dan the job again. Officially this time, Chief of Security Operations, salary of $120,000, full benefits, office on the 38th floor. Dan accepted, for Maya, for himself, for the promise he'd made to Sarah to keep flying. His first day as an executive, Dan arrived in a suit that actually fit, custom tailored. Elena had insisted, said if he was going to represent Apex, he needed to look the part. He felt ridiculous, the tie strangling him, the shoes too shiny. But Maya had been so proud that morning, insisted on taking a picture of Daddy in his boss clothes. The security team assembled in the conference room. 20 men and women who'd been running operations without real oversight for months. They looked skeptical when Dan walked in. He could read their thoughts. Who's this? Some executive's friend? Political hire? My name is Daniel Rivers, Dan began. 10 days ago, I was cleaning toilets on the night shift. Today, I'm your boss. I'm guessing some of you think that's a problem. A few uncomfortable shifts. Nobody willing to say it out loud. You're right to be skeptical. I would be too. Dan pulled up his sleeve, showed the tattoo. But before I cleaned toilets, I flew helicopters for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. I did that for 8 years until I made a mistake that got me discharged. I took this job because I needed work and Mr. Sterling needed eyes he could trust. He had their attention now. 2 weeks ago, 3 board members conspired to murder Elena Sterling. They would have succeeded except I'd been watching them for 3.5 years. I found the evidence, built the push, stopped the assassination. Dan paused. I'm not here because I'm connected. I'm here because I'm good at finding threats before they kill people. That's what we're going to do together. Respect, not universal, but enough. Over the following months, Dan built something, not just a security team, a culture. He hired veterans, people like him who'd served and struggled to find their place after, gave them training, purpose, the kind of mission that meant something. He also did something else, something harder. He started therapy again, real therapy, not court-mandated sessions to keep his disability benefits, actual work on the trauma, the nightmares, the guilt. His therapist was Dr. Sarah Kim, 50-something, former Army psychiatrist. She didn't let him hide. You've been punishing yourself for 5 years, she said during one session, for a mistake you made following orders with bad intelligence. When does the sentence end? When I stopped seeing their faces, you'll always see them. Trauma doesn't erase, but it can integrate, become part of your story instead of the only story. How? By forgiving yourself, by accepting that good people sometimes do harmful things in impossible situations, by choosing to live fully instead of half alive. It was the hardest work Dan had ever done. Harder than combat, harder than raising Maya alone, harder than anything. But slowly, incrementally, he started sleeping better. The pills became optional instead of mandatory. The nightmares came less frequently. He started living instead of just surviving. And somewhere in those months, something else happened. Something neither Dan nor Elena planned or expected. They fell in love. It started small. Coffee meetings that ran long. Conversations about work that drifted to personal. Dan telling stories about Maya. Elena sharing memories of Richard. Two people who'd both lost the loves of their lives, finding comfort in shared grief. Then more. Dinners after late meetings. Elena asking about Dan's day. Dan noticing when Elena looked tired. Small touches that lingered. Glances that meant something. Maya noticed first. Children always do. Daddy likes Miss Elena, she announced one evening at dinner. Dan nearly choked on his pasta. What makes you say that? You smile different when you talk about her. Your happy smile, not your pretend smile. Out of the mouths of children. Truth that adults spend months avoiding. She's my boss, baby girl. It's complicated. Why? Mommy would want you to be happy. Dan set down his fork, looked at his daughter. When had she gotten so wise? You're right, Mommy would, but loving someone new feels like forgetting Mommy, and I don't want to forget her. Maya came around the table, climbed into his lap even though she was getting too big for it. Daddy, you talk about Mommy every day. We look at pictures. You tell me stories. You could never forget her. She touched his chest. She's in here, forever, but that doesn't mean there's no room for someone else. Dan held his daughter, this miracle of perception and love, and knew she was right. He needed to tell Elena how he felt, before fear made him small again. The opportunity came during a company charity event. Apex was sponsoring a gala for veteran support services. Black tie, 500 guests, fundraising for PTSD treatment and job placement programs. Elena had insisted Dan attend. You're an executive now. That means showing up to these things. Dan showed up, in a tuxedo Elena had helped him pick out. He felt like an imposter, like someone playing dress-up in a life that didn't belong to him. Until he saw Elena. She wore a midnight blue gown, hair down for once. All elegant, beautiful. But what struck him wasn't the dress or the styling. It was the way she carried herself, confident. No longer the grieving daughter playing at CEO. The real thing. Their eyes met across the ballroom. She smiled, excused herself from a conversation with a senator, crossed to him. You clean up nicely, Mr. Rivers. You're stunning, Miss Sterling. Elena, we're not at the office. Elena. They stood there. Music playing, people dancing, a moment stretching. Dance with me, Elena asked. Dan hesitated. I'm not very good. Neither am I. We'll figure it out together. On the dance floor, Dan's hand found her waist. Her hand rested on his shoulder. They moved awkwardly at first, finding rhythm, then settling into it. Can I tell you something? Dan said quietly. Anything. When I was at my lowest, after the discharge, after Sarah died, I decided life wasn't worth the effort. I had pills saved up. A plan. He met her eyes. Your father showing up at the VA that day saved my life. Gave me a reason to keep going. Elena's hand tightened on his shoulder. And now, Dan continued, you've given me something I thought I'd never have again. Hope. The belief that my life can be more than punishment for past mistakes. Dan, I'm in love with you, Elena. I know it's complicated. I'm your employee. You're my boss. We come from different worlds. But I can't pretend anymore. You deserve to know. Elena stopped dancing. For a terrible moment, Dan thought he'd ruined everything. Then she kissed him. In the middle of the ballroom, in front of 500 people, in front of cameras and press and colleagues. She kissed him like he was oxygen and she'd been drowning. When they pulled apart, the room had gone quiet. Everyone staring. Elena didn't care. "I love you too," she said. "I've loved you since you talked me through that landing. Since you risked everything to save me. Since I saw how you are with Maya. People are watching. Let them watch. I'm done caring what people think about who I love." The applause started slowly, then built. 500 people celebrating two broken people, finding wholeness in each other. That night after the gala, Elena came home with Dan and Maya. First time she'd seen their apartment in the Bronx. The humble two-bedroom with duct-taped furniture and hand-me-down dishes. Maya gave her the full tour, showed her the bedroom, the drawings on the wall, the photograph of Sarah by the bed. "That's my mommy," Maya said. "She was beautiful." "She was," Elena agreed. "Your daddy must have loved her very much." "He did, but Daddy says love doesn't run out. There's always more if you're brave enough to find it." Elena looked at Dan. He shrugged. "She's smarter than both of us." They put Maya to bed together. Dan read the story. Elena sat at the foot of the bed. When Maya drifted off, they stood in the doorway watching her sleep. "I never thought I'd have this," Elena whispered. "A family. After my father died, I thought I was alone. You're not alone, not anymore." 6 months later, Dan moved into Elena's penthouse. Brought Maya. Rosa came too, insisting someone needed to keep them all organized. The apartment filled with life, with laughter, with the chaos of a child who didn't understand that some things were too expensive to touch. Elena loved every minute of it. She taught Maya to paint. Proper art lessons from a woman who'd minored in studio art at Princeton. Watch this beautiful child create masterpieces on canvases that cost more than Dan used to make in a month. Dan taught Elena to cook. Real cooking. Not ordering from restaurants or heating up prepared meals. He showed her how to make chicken from scratch, how to season properly, how food could be an act of love. They became a family, not replacing what they'd lost, but building something new from the pieces that remained. A year after the conspiracy collapsed, Elena and Dan stood on the roof of Apex Aviation, the same roof where she'd nearly died, where he'd first revealed himself. The helicopter sat there, fully repaired, certified safe by 3 independent inspectors. "I haven't flown since the accident," Elena said. "I know. My father taught me that when you fall off a horse, you get back on immediately, before fear becomes permanent." Wise man. "Will you fly with me?" Dan looked at the helicopter, felt the old panic rising, the memories, Kandahar, the mistake, the screaming. But he also felt Elena's hand in his, felt the year of therapy, the work of healing, the choice to live instead of just survive. "Yes," he said, "together." They did the pre-flight check together, Dan's hands remembering movements from another lifetime, Elena watching him, seeing him not as a janitor or even as security chief, but as the pilot he'd always been underneath. They climbed in. Dan took the controls, Elena in the co-pilot seat. "You're shaking," she said gently. "Terrified," he admitted. "We don't have to do this." "Yes, we do." Dan started the engine. The rotors began spinning, the sound that used to trigger panic attacks. Now just sound, mechanical, neutral. They lifted off. Manhattan spread below them. 40 stories of Apex Aviation getting smaller. The city stretching in every direction. Beautiful, terrifying, full of possibility. "How do you feel?" Elena asked. Dan checked his hands on the controls, steady, his breathing, even, his mind, clear. "I feel like I'm flying," he said. They flew for an hour, over the city, over the Bronx where Dan had lived in that tiny apartment, over the hospital where Sarah had died, over Maya's school, flying not to escape, but to remember, to honor, to integrate all the pieces of who they'd been into who they were becoming. When they landed, Dan's face was wet with tears, but he was smiling. "Thank you," he told Elena. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for trusting me, for loving me, for making me remember I'm more than my worst mistake." Elena unbuckled, leaned across the console, kissed him softly. "You saved my life, Daniel Rivers, over and over. Let me save yours too." They married 6 months later. Small ceremony. Rosa and Maya, Becca, and a few close friends. No press, no spectacle, Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of loss, making promises to build something new. Maya was flower girl. She took the job seriously, practiced her walk for weeks. When the moment came, she scattered petals like she was blessing the ground they walked on. At the reception, such as it was, Maya made a toast. 7 years old, standing on a chair, holding sparkling cider in a plastic champagne flute. My daddy says love is what you do, not what you say. Miss Elena, you do love every day. You're nice to daddy. You're nice to me. You make us happy. So thank you for loving us. We love you too. Not a dry Tom in the room. Dan stood, put his arm around his daughter, looked at his wife. His wife. Still getting used to that word. I want to add something, he said. 5 years ago, I was broken. Thought my life was over. Thought I had nothing left to give. Then a man named Richard Sterling gave me a job, gave me purpose, made me understand that hitting bottom isn't the end. It's just the place where you decide what comes next. He raised his glass to Richard and to Sarah, the people we lost who somehow led us to each other, to second chance, to families we build instead of the ones we're born into, to love that doesn't replace but multiplies. Everyone drank. The reception continued into the evening. Small, intimate, perfect in its simplicity. Maya fell asleep on Dan's shoulder around 9. Rosa took her home. The remaining guests drifted away until only Dan and Elena remained. They stood on the small patio of the community center they'd rented. Not fancy, not expensive, just real. The Bronx spread around them, sirens in the distance, music from open windows, life happening in all its messy, beautiful complexity. What now? Elena asked. Dan pulled her close. Now we live, really live, not survive, not hide, live. And the nightmares will probably come, some nights. But I'll have you to wake up to. That changes everything. They stood there, husband and wife, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other, who'd learned that love doesn't erase pain, it just makes the pain bearable. The next chapter of their lives was just beginning. 18 months after the wedding, Dan stood in a different kind of room. Congressional hearing, Washington, D.C., wood-paneled walls, serious-faced senators, cameras recording every word. He wore his dress uniform. First time in 6 years. The medals felt heavy, not just their physical weight, the weight of what they represented, who he'd been, who he'd become. Mr. Rivers, Senator Catherine Walsh began, your testimony has been instrumental in dismantling what we now know was a decade-long conspiracy to steal military technology. Can you walk us through how you first became aware of the threat? Dan leaned into the microphone. 3.5 years ago, Richard Sterling hired me to clean his building. But that wasn't really He hired me to watch, to see threats other people missed. He suspected someone close to him was compromised. He was right. For 2 hours, Dan testified. Philip Morgan's cooperation had given them names. Dan's documentation gave them proof. Together, they'd exposed a network that stretched from corporate boardrooms to defense contractors to foreign governments. 17 arrests, 47 indictments. Complete dismantling of an operation that had been funneling weapons technology to unauthorized buyers for nearly a decade. When it was over, when the last question had been asked and answered, Dan stepped outside. Elena was waiting. She'd taken the day off, flown down to be there. How do you feel? She asked. Like I finally finished the mission, the one Richard gave me. Protect what he built. Stop the people who killed him. Make sure it never happens again. He'd be proud. I hope so. They flew back to New York that evening. Maya was waiting at the apartment. 9 years old now, growing fast. She'd watched her father testify on C-SPAN during school. Her teacher had made it a civics lesson. My dad, the hero, Maya had written in her journal. I always knew. That night, after Maya was asleep, Dan and Elena made a decision. They'd been talking about it for months. Planning. Now felt like the right time. They were going to start a foundation, the Sterling Rivers Foundation, named for Richard and Sarah. Funded by a portion of Dan's apex salary, Elena's personal wealth, and donations from people who believed in the mission. 2 purposes, job training and placement for veterans struggling to transition, and mental health services for anyone who'd served. Free. No caps, no questions, just help. The foundation opened 6 months later. Small office in Queens, 3 staff members. Dan ran it while maintaining his role at Apex. Elena served as board chair. Becca handled administration. The first year, they placed 83 veterans in meaningful employment, provided therapy to over 200, prevented 4 suicides through direct intervention. Small numbers in the grand scheme, but each number was a life, a person, a veteran who deserved better than the system had given them. Dan met with every candidate personally, shared his story, let them see that recovery was possible, that mistakes didn't define you, that PTSD wasn't a life sentence, just a condition, manageable with help. One afternoon, a young man walked into the office. Marcus Williams, 24 years old, Marine, lost his leg in Syria, angry at the world, convinced his life was over. Dan sat with him for 3 hours. I made a mistake in Kandahar, Dan told him. Fired on what I thought was an enemy vehicle. It was a family, 2 parents, 4 kids. They survived, but I almost killed them. Marcus listened, really listened. For 5 years, I wanted to die. Thought I had nothing left. Thought the guilt would crush me. Then someone gave me a second chance. Someone saw past the mistakes to who I could still become. How do you live with it? Marcus asked. The guilt? You don't live with it. You live through it, day by day, sometimes hour by hour. You accept that you can't change the past, only the future. You find people who need what you have to give. You serve them, help them, save them if you can. And slowly the guilt becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you. Marcus stared at his prosthetic leg. What if I can't find anything to give? Dan pulled out his phone, showed him a picture. Maya and Elena at the park, ice cream on their faces, laughing. 5 years ago, I was cleaning toilets and planning to kill myself. Today I have this, a daughter who thinks I'm a hero, a wife who sees my worst and loves me anyway. Work that matters. None of it erases Kandahar, but it makes life worth living despite Kandahar. Can I come back next week? Every week if you want. We're here. Marcus came back, week after week, started therapy, started training. 6 months later, he had a job. Aerospace engineering, designing better prosthetics for other veterans. Last Dan heard, Marcus was engaged, building a life, paying forward what had been given to him. One life among hundreds. Small victories. Lives saved not through grand gestures, but through showing up. Through refusing to give up on people the world had written off. Maya grew. 10, then 11. Smart like both her mothers. Sarah's compassion, Elena's drive. She thrived in a world where her father wore suits and her stepmother ran a billion-dollar company. But Dan and Elena kept her grounded, kept the apartment in the Bronx even though they could easily afford a mansion. Made sure she understood that money was a tool, not a measure of worth, not a substitute for character. Maya became obsessed with helicopters, wanted to be a pilot like her dad. Dan took her up sometimes, let her hold the controls with his hands over hers, taught her the basics, watched her face light up with joy. When I grow up, Maya announced one evening at dinner, I'm going to fly helicopters and save people, just like you. Dan's heart swelled. You can be anything you want. I want to be like you. Then be better than me. Learn from my mistakes. Be braver, kinder, stronger. That's impossible. You're already the best. Children, their faith could break your heart or heal it. Sometimes both. 4 years after the conspiracy collapsed, Dan stood in another important room. Hospital boardroom. Manhattan General. The same hospital where Sarah had died. Where medical bills had crushed them. Where grief had lived for so long it felt permanent. Today was different. Today they were unveiling something new. Elena stood beside him. Maya, now 11, between them. Rosa in the front row. Becca and her husband. Colonel Morrison, who'd flown in from Fort Campbell. A room full of people who'd been part of this journey. The hospital CEO pulled a cord. A curtain fell away. The Sarah Rivers Memorial Wing. Oncology Department. State-of-the-art. Funded by the Sterling Rivers Foundation. $2 million. Every penny raised through the foundation's work. The same hospital where Sarah died. Now saving other people's wives. Mothers, daughters. Dan couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Elena's hand found his, squeezed. Maya read the dedication plaque out loud. She'd insisted, wanted to honor the grandmother she barely remembered. In memory of Sarah Rivers, beloved wife, devoted mother, who taught us that love doesn't end when we say goodbye. It transforms. It multiplies. It saves lives long after we're gone. Maya's voice cracked on the last words. Dan knelt beside her, held her while she cried. For the mother she'd lost. For the father who'd survived. For all of it. Mommy would love this, Maya whispered. She would, baby girl. She really would. The dedication ceremony was short. Hospital staff, patients, families, the people whose lives this wing would save. Dr. Sarah Kim spoke. Dan's therapist, the one who'd helped him find his way back. 5 years ago, Dan Rivers came to me convinced he didn't deserve to live. Broken by trauma, crushed by guilt. Today he's saved hundreds of lives. Not just through this foundation, through his example. Through proving that healing is possible, that second chances are real, that broken people can become whole if they're brave enough to treat. More speeches, more tears, more gratitude than Dan knew how to hold. When it ended, when the crowd dispersed, Dan found himself alone in the new wing. Walking the halls Sarah had never seen. Touching walls built in her name. A young woman approached, maybe 30, bald from chemo, thin, but alive. Are you Mr. Rivers? I am. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm starting treatment here next week. Without this wing, without the financial assistance program you set up, I couldn't afford it. You're saving my life. Dan's throat closed. I'm sorry you're going through this. Me too, but I'm not giving up. Your wife didn't. Neither will I. She walked away, left Dan standing there, thinking about Sarah, about the fight she'd fought, about how death isn't always the end of someone's impact. Elena found him, slipped her hand into his. You okay? Yeah, just thinking about how far we've come. From invisible to this, from broken to whole, from cleaning toilets to saving lives. You were always saving lives. I just helped you see it. They stood in Sarah's wing, in the hospital where grief had lived, now transformed into hope, into healing, into legacy. What now? Elena asked. The question she'd asked at their wedding. The one she kept asking because life kept answering. Now we keep going, keep building, keep helping, keep flying. Together? Always together. They walked out of the hospital hand in hand, Maya waiting outside with Rosa, their family, imperfect, patched together from loss, but whole in the ways that mattered. The sun was setting over Manhattan, the city where Richard had built an empire, where Sarah had fought cancer, where Dan had learned to be invisible, where Elena had almost died, the city that had broken them all and given them chances to rebuild. Dan looked at his family, his wife, his daughter, his life. Let's go home, he said, not to the penthouse, not to the office, but to the small apartment in the Bronx they'd kept all these years. The place where it all began, where a broken man learned to be a father, where hope grew in duct-taped furniture and hand-me-down dishes. Because home isn't about money or square footage or imported marble. Home is where people see you clearly and love you anyway. Home is where your daughter's drawings hang on refrigerators. Home is where you can take off the armor and just be human. Dan Rivers had spent years being invisible, hiding from his past, punishing himself for mistakes that weren't entirely his to carry. But invisibility was a choice, and so was stepping into the light. He chose the light, every day, in small ways and large, through therapy and honesty and love and work that mattered. He chose to keep flying, not in helicopters always, but in life, taking risks, trusting himself, being visible even when it scared him. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. The janitor became visible, the broken became whole. The man who thought his story ended in Kandahar discovered it was just beginning, the end.